I think we're going to disagree a lot on the podcast today.
Especially about the introduction?
Sure, about the introduction. Absolutely. But
welcome to Ministry Leaders Anonymous.
You came prepared to win a battle, but I came prepared to win a war.
I think you are reading a script. That's really weird.
Speaking of reading scripts, let's go. Welcome to Ministry Leaders Anonymous. My name is Chris Bartlett.
And I'm Matt Rice, and we hope to provide a moment of sanity during a busy week of ministry.
We've both worked in ministry for over 20 years and have seen just about everything.
And as damaged as we are, we're ready to dive into and bring light to the hurts, hopes, and hungers that every minister has. Did you see my 2-0? I don't know what I was doing there. I was like, oh.
Yeah, check us out on YouTube if you want to see the video version of it to see Matt mess up on that. We are there. Just search Ablaze Youth or Ablaze Ministries. Which one is our YouTube channel? Yes, I think it's Ablaze Ministries, and you'll find us.
Excellent. So, Chris, you started this off with like throwing down the gauntlet. Like, what am I going to disagree with you about?
So we had a conversation the other day, and I said that I did not like the phrase, God has no grandchildren.
Yes, but did you tell them? Can you tell the people why you don't like that phrase?
Yes.
Go.
Okay, I don't like that phrase because I believe that it withdraws or takes away, diminishes even the role of parents in regards to bringing their kids to the faith.
And I gave you a hard time because that's not what that statement means.
But that is an implication that statement has a lasting. So tell me how you interpret that statement, God has no grandchildren.
So the way that statement was meant to be made, and you can go back and read Sherry Waddell's book, is that God has children. That God has direct relationships with his children. He does not have grandchildren. He does not have relationships with people through other people. That's what that statement means.
False.
Prove it.
You said God does not have relationships with people through other people, and that diminishes the entire work of evangelization. If we do not believe that God can have relationship with others because of our working through us, God can work through us. Okay, see, this is where I'm saying.
That's different. Like, God can have a relationship with other people because I bring them to God. Yes, but he's a direct relationship with them. His relationship with them is not through us. I'm sorry. Like, that's not how this works.
But it is through us because that's how this works. Like, that is how evangelization,
it's
the
not
work
through
of evangelization.
Us. It's not through us. God uses us to create a relationship with that person directly.
So he doesn't use us. He partners with us. The documents
oh my gosh, semantics.
They say co-workers in the vineyard. So if I can claim my own child as one of my tasks as a parent, right, standing there as a parent is to get that child to heaven, right?
Yeah, your job is to get that child to have a direct relationship with God. Thus, God has no grandchildren. Your child is not God's grandchild.
But if people interpret it as the only way that people are going to get to heaven is a direct relationship with God, absent other avenues, I think that that's a dangerous mentality.
I just think you're misunderstanding it or like getting fine-tuned into something that doesn't make sense. You know, like our job as ministry leaders, our job as disciple makers is to help other people have a direct personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
I agree.
That is God's child.
Yes.
He has no grandchildren. Like if I have a relationship with God and my relationship with God disappears and anyone else's relationship with God disappears, that's a broken relationship. That means I was doing it wrong because I was making it a Chris-centered ministry rather than a Christ-centered ministry.
You did it. My favorite phrase.
I know.
Okay. You won this round. You won this round by throwing that in there. But I guess the point is I believe that the most assured way to get someone to be a child of God is through the domestic church, through the family.
Sure. And the family dimension does get like, you're like, wait a second, you know, if God has no grandchildren, well, what does that mean about my kids and my kids' kids? Now that's a totally different, conversation is the effect that the family has on the faith life of the child, there is no refuting that. Like there's no refuting how impactful the family's faith life is, the parents' faith life is on the kid's faith life. But that's, not even connected to the fact that your job as a parent is to get that kid to have a direct relationship with God, not that it goes through you.
Can we at least consider the goal of salvation to be a co-parenting reality between the parents and God?
I don't like that.
Yeah, the phrase co-parenting has so many weird things attached to it. But what I'm saying is, like, the way that it's structured, we literally assign God parents to it, right? And so to say that this is God's child, but this is also your child as a God child, like there is an investment that goes deeper than just, there's a familial relationship investment that's created through that.
Agreed.
And so there's co-parenting.
So guys, you want to know what started all this? It was beautiful butterflies. Chris was learning about beautiful butterflies and something pretty amazing about butterflies, particular butterflies.
Yeah.
And then Chris and I got in an argument about God having grandchildren.
So there are butterflies, and in particular, the monarch butterflies, when they journey north, it takes them 4 generations to get there. So there's butterflies that leave to go to Canada. There's butterflies that come back from Canada to the United States. And when they do that, it takes 4 generations of butterflies to get from where they start to their destination. And in regards to our work as ministry leaders, and the way that we sometimes outsource pieces from the family instead of invest into the family. And I look at this because a lot of times people drop their children off at religious education programs or faith formation programs, and then they come back an hour and a half later and pick them up. And that is the extent of the partnering that we have in regards to investing in families in some areas. And I think that's problematic because we need to put them in this context of the story of salvation history isn't just involved with God having no grandchildren, but that they need to leave a legacy of faith for the generations beyond them so that their last name is present in heaven for generations to come. That's what I was getting at.
So you've got butterflies that start to leave Canada, head into Mexico, that die in Kansas, right?
Yeah.
They have babies. Those babies then fly to Oklahoma or something. I don't know my geography, guys. And then those die.
They literally go on the east-west line after going north-south for so long. They're like, this is a nice area. There's not a lot here, so let's explore.
Here for a bit.
Yeah.
And then the next generation goes to Texas, and then they die and have more monarch babies, and then they head on to the next generation goes to Mexico. And so it's kind of amazing that creature, like they don't even like they're just going in a certain direction, but I don't know anything about butterflies, Chris. How much did you learn from butterflies? Do they have this innate sense to go there, or does grandma butterfly teach them where they're going?
That's an interesting thing. I think it is almost instinctual, right? So like built into the existence of their identity as a butterfly. How cool would that be to where if all of a sudden a kid just wakes up, they're like, I am instinctually oh my gosh. I can't say it. Say it for me. Say it.
Instinctually
driven. Thank you. Towards Christ. Like that is my existence. Why? Because the generations before me have set up a pathway to where it doesn't make any sense for my existence to have meaning outside of the context of I am a child, not grandchild, a child of God. And I work and I operate within that reality. To be driven towards a destination beyond themselves.
It's interesting though, because like that, I feel like what you just said, and what we were talking about with regards to God having no grandchildren are in direct opposition. Like there is no instinct that will get kids to heaven. Like it's just not there. Now it's going to be learned from your environment, but it can't be something that you don't just do, right? It has to be something you take ownership of and you make a decision, right? It's not just inherited. You don't inherit heaven.
We are disagreeing all over the place because our very creation is orientated towards heaven. We are incomplete until we return home to heaven. And so our makeup as human beings to hunger, there's a God-shaped hole in our heart. You've heard these type of things.
Yeah, I hate that term.
Well, but it's part of the human condition. Part of the human condition is to seek out fulfillment.
I gotta stop. Pause. There was a term that I heard. I wish I remembered where I got it from and where I heard it from. But this idea was so much better. So that whole God-shaped hole in your heart thing is like I can't stand it.
Feels like a country song.
But what I heard was your heart is so big that nothing in this world will fill it. Totally different. Like you have the capacity to love and whatever in a way that nothing, like no physical thing in this world, nothing in this world will fill that. So it's a different, it's the same kind of thing, but it's different.
Just on that note, when I was a child growing up, we had 2 dogs, Shadow and Misty. Misty died because she got a condition to where her heart got enlarged, and it kept growing and growing until it reached the size of the body cavity, and then she died because her heart wouldn't function because it got too big to be able to function in the context of her tiny body. My dog died of a big heart. And now you're bringing this up on the podcast, and it's making me think of Sweet Misty, a Cocker Spaniel mix.
This podcast is a freaking mess. So anyway, on to the butterfly instinctual thing. Yes, I get it. Like we are created, for God, right? By God, for God, and that's what we're oriented toward. What God has created us for. Whether or not we what, Chris?
Can we just dedicate the rest of the show to those who have lost dogs? For Misty.
All right, for Misty. Now, moving on.
Get us back on track. I'm so sorry. You were on a roll.
I was trying.
I can't help myself.
But that's like, that is different. The fact that we are searching and we're searching for him is different than destined for heaven. Now, that's not the right way to say it either, because we're destined for heaven. But it doesn't mean that we just like, if we do nothing, we go there.
In our most natural state, which is prior to the stain of original sin, that would be the monarch butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
In a way. Yeah, sure.
Prior that we would be on this track towards our destination of child of God, salvation, heaven.
We would follow the right path. Because without concupiscence?
Concupiscence. Yes, I got to help you today too.
Then like we would follow the right path.
Correct.
Okay. But that's not where you wanted to go with this whole monarch thing. Like you wanted to do like some sort of generational pass down the faith to my kids. In 2 or 3 generations, if we actually did that, we wouldn't have a pagan society.
Right. Yeah. So if everyone lived the way that they were called to be lived, it would be so contagious that all of a sudden we would find ourselves that everyone would be Christian in a matter of a couple of generations.
Yeah.
But I want us to be able to see that our role as ministry leaders is to empower parents with a vision that, like, maybe I've been through a couple of divorces, or I struggle with some sort of sin that people might call generational sin or different things like that. And it's like, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to beat the dominating role of alcohol that exists in my family tree, but I'm going to move it a step forward so that the next generation can see God that much more clear, can seek God that much more clear, and move it a step forward to eventually get to better the generation behind you by the generation that you're living and raising today in the faith.
Yeah, and I would, argue, and is that if the parent is a child of God, not a grandchild, like if a parent has a real relationship with Jesus, their ability to, co-work with God to help their child have a real relationship with Jesus, I mean, it's actually there. Like there's like, I won't say it's impossible. It's very unlikely that a parent without a relationship with Jesus would be super effective in helping their kid have a relationship with Jesus. Does that make sense? Like
Oh,
if you're
I
not a
agree.
disciple, if you're not even a Christian, like you can't make other Christians.
I agree with that 100%. But I believe that there are systemic realities of sin that exist. Does that make sense?
I think so.
And so
How
if you
does it, what
look
does
at
this
the
have to do
old,
with butterflies?
because you can break it. So in the Old Testament, the blind man, right? And even in the Gospels and things like that, he was shamed because there is a reason he's blind, and it's probably because of the sins of his parents, right? And so that's a generational example of sin. I believe that there can be generational examples of grace as well, to where the grace that we live as parents, as those who are seeking, can all of a sudden bear fruit in the generation beyond us. And that grace can grow or be stewarded in a way to where 3 or 4 generations from now, that we've got saints and vocations that might not have even been reasonably possible in a generation, 2 or 3 generations prior. And to get wrapped up in that reality, to say, I am going to take an intentional step forward, because I think a lot of times what we do in ministry is we set a standard, and people who fall below that standard are left feeling forsaken or lost. And they're just like, oh, well. But guess what? Like, your dad struggled with this, or your mom struggled with this, and you struggle with these things, but you handle it better than the generation before you. And that means that the next generation might just be in a place to where they have the tools to be able to seek God with clarity, as opposed to in the midst of the chaos that exists in the family situation that they may have inherited.
Well, and like we do this on a physical, like I guess secular level, is like I want to provide better for my kids than my parents provided for me, or I want to provide this opportunity. So, and you do like baby steps, if you will. It's not like I want to be a millionaire so my kids don't have to worry about anything. When I grew up in poverty, like that's a huge transition. You might just say, okay, I wasn't able to finish high school. I want my kids to be able to finish high school. That's our goal. And then your kids may say, okay, I finished high school. I did not finish college. I want my kids to go through college. And then the next step is beyond that, and so the same sort of thing can go with regards to family, setting goals for their spiritual life. Like my parents, we never prayed during meals. Like I'm not saying that about me, but actually we didn't, but
So now you are.
but now I am. But we're at least going to start doing that. As a family, I'm gonna start doing that, and then take a step further, and then maybe encourage my kids to take a step further, or it by doing that encourages your kids to take a step further. And it may be something that you do. I mean, obviously, a family can't go from never praying to like I don't know, like monk level praying, in a week. Like that's not that's not something you would set a family up for.
Right.
But I wouldn't say like take generations to do it. Like, so.
Right. Yes. But that whole idea of prayer is something that we started doing when I was an adolescent. That might be generation 1 or generation 2. Prayer is something we never did. Prayer is something that I started doing, when I was an adolescent. To the next one is prayer has always been a part of who I am as a child and a member of this family. I think that that's a generational example of that reality. But just to get the mentality that, like, if the butterflies are willing to make the journey to where they don't get to see the fruits, like I will not get to see my kids in heaven when I get to heaven. If I die first, you know what I mean? And if I don't get to heaven, God forbid, literally, God forbid that I don't get to heaven. You know what I mean? That I can still have the hope that they can make it to heaven, that I have set them on a pathway, a trajectory towards that reality. And if we get that type of a stewardship or mentality to where the journey is bigger than us, because that's the challenge that I see is, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say this, like there are people who don't like wearing masks at mass. Mm-hmm. And they go into the liturgy. And if you're one of those people, I'm not meaning to offend. This is just an observation from my point of view. But if you go into the liturgy and you're like, I'm not going to wear a mask because I don't believe blah, blah, blah this or blah, blah, blah that, and there's evidence on both sides of the conversation, then the liturgy is just all about you and your relationship with Jesus, right? But what about the person next to you who might feel uncomfortable because you're not wearing a mask? Would you be willing to wear a mask if it made someone next to you more comfortable during the liturgy so that they could focus on receiving and encountering Christ? Now, all of a sudden, the faith journey, the experience of Mass, changes to being just about me and my spiritual needs to about the hospitality and the comfort of the whole community journeying towards Christ. And I think that that's a mentality that we need to instill, because I see it. I see it when parents are like, well, my kid's not going to Catholic church right now, but they are going to some Protestant church, and so that's better than nothing. Like, but if you truly believe that the Catholic Church is the surest way to heaven, then why aren't you fighting tooth and nail to get them on that path? To take them just one step further, even if it means you lay down your life to make that a reality so that they can cocoon and then break free and continue down that path for the next generation, just like those beautiful butterflies.
What you do with these analogies cracks me up.
Buckle up, Matt. Buckle up. The other piece, if I may, if you'll indulge me, is I'm not just talking about generations and families. How can Generation X impact Generation Y to make Generation Z the holiest generation? There's posters that went around at the last pro-life march. My generation will end abortion. And there's these 9, 10, 12, 13-year-old kids that are holding these signs. Generation Z, Gen Z are holding these signs, being confident. And I love that poster because it says the generation that printed the posters, right? Generation X hands them to their kids and says, you guys are going to do this. We believe in you because we've taken the movement this far, and you guys are going to take it home. And that's a beautiful thing, right? And to believe that the generation after us is going to make society better than what it is right now. And I don't get that sense of confidence. I think sometimes we just compromise. Well, at least it's not bad as this, so let's just kind of peel it back a little bit and just peel it back a little bit. And you see that in our country, in postmodernism and all these different things. And I want to shift that mentality to say we can impact future generations in a way that gets them there, even if we don't get to see the fruits of that work.
I like it.
All right. Well, there we go. Told you I'd win.
I mean, I don't know how you do that. I mean, you obviously you set the goal and you set, where you want to be, where you want to go, and you aim for it. And I think, sometimes like what you just said is we tend to aim shorter than we should, yeah.
So a group of butterflies, they're officially called a kaleidoscope, although sometimes they're referred to as a swarm. Isn't that crazy? A group of butterflies. Now, I don't know how we do that in the kaleidoscope or swarm mentality. How do we get an entire generation to move with us? But Mama Butterfly isn't concerned with that. She just lays out the larva and she's in charge of those. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm asking the ministry leaders to be concerned with an entire generation. I think that they're going to be concerned with the 5 or 6 youth that they have close relationship with the people that are going through their RCAA class right now, with those that they're in relationship with their neighbors, their own children. That's what I'm asking. I'm not asking you to shift the whole swarm. I'm asking that we stay focused with our few and lead those few with a mentality that they're going to have a domino effect that goes down till the end of time. As a role in salvation history, you are a thread that goes through it, through your participation with God's grace that can impact future generations.
Cool.
Because otherwise, it gets discouraging. I don't know how you change an entire generation.
Yeah.
One person at a time. That's how.
Interesting. I'm thinking about this podcast. At the very beginning, we were really heated, and now we're just like, I don't know. I feel like I'm like, okay. I'm not making fun of you about this analogy anymore. I feel like I picked on you enough.
Well, I think it's inspiring. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And there's this preacher for one of the churches, and his name's, I think, Bill Johnson or something Johnson. Let's see. I actually have the YouTube video pulled up. It's Bill Johnson. And he was the one who kind of introduced me to this concept. And he said it with tears in his eyes about just the beautiful reality of God's creatures have this generational mentality. And yet sometimes we as human beings lose the generational mentality. But if we can move into ministry as ministry leaders thinking, I'm not just going to save a soul, but I'm going to save a family, help participate in the salvation of, right? It is obviously not a Christ-centered ministry. Matt emphasized that very clearly early on in the podcast. But if we can see that the work that we do isn't just about the person that stands before us, but those that they influence, I think that changes our mentality. And this goes back to the Christian versus disciple thing. If we just put one person in relationship with Christ, right? That's great. That is great. But if we put one person in relationship with Christ and the mission of a disciple, then we're impacting future generations like the butterflies.
Oh,
which is wonderful. That's the goal.
That's
If a Christian without or a disciple without mission is kind of meaningless. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like a joke without a punchline. So, okay, there we go, you guys. I would love to hear your thoughts or your analogies that might work better, because clearly Matt struggled with this one a little bit. God has no grandchildren, but you do have godchildren. And so lean into those realities of the influence of the one before you so that you can make a generational impact in the way that you love, and help them bloom. What's it called when they emerge from the cocoon? Is that blooming?
I don't know. Moving on.
Into
Please send
beautiful
any
butterflies.
feedback you guys have to mla@ablaze.us and share this podcast with someone.
And here at Ministry Leaders Anonymous, we believe that if you want to go quickly, go alone.
And if you want to go far, we go together.
Like a kaleidoscope of butterflies, or sometimes called a swarm. Take some time this week to pray for other ministry leaders and pray for those that you believe will impact the next generation, and think of ways that you can pour into them even now.
We will see you guys next week on Ministry Leaders Anonymous.
And God bless. Butterfly in the sky, I can see twice as high.
When
Take a look.
larva.
It's in a book, a reading rainbow.
All I could think was larva, 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 larva. Isn't that like from Flushed Away?
I have no idea. You got to understand, I am a generation behind you in regards to children's movies. Yeah.
I gotcha.